Welcome to Noir Street.
Like, subscribe, and stay on Noir Street.
Tell me, which part of the world are you watching from?
Chapter 1. The newspaper in the wrong shape. The first thing Inspector Thomas Reed noticed was the dead man. The second was the newspaper. That order was proper for a policeman. But Nero Wolfe later maintained that the newspaper was more informative. Walter Crane sat in his favorite chair beside the fireplace at Harrison House, his chin resting against his chest and his right hand hanging toward the carpet. He appeared to have fallen asleep over the evening edition. The small wound beneath his ear and the blood drying along his collar suggested otherwise. The newspaper lay beside his hand, folded into a thick square. Walter Crane had never folded a newspaper that way. I learned this at 9:40 when the telephone rang in the office on West 35th Street. Wolfe was behind his desk reading a report on orchid diseases. I was adding figures that had already resisted 2 previous attempts to become reasonable. Nero Wolfe's office, Archie Goodwin speaking. A man said, "Inspector Thomas Reed, is Wolfe available?" "He is physically present. That is not always the same thing." Wolfe lowered the report. "Where?" "Harrison House, 17 Riddle Street." "Connection to us. Your card is beside his telephone. His daughter says he intended to consult Wolfe tonight." I covered the receiver and reported. Wolfe frowned. "Did Mr. Crane call earlier?" "He did." I remembered the call because Walter Crane had sounded like a man annoyed by fear. At 6:30 he had told me that someone was entering his private study without permission, sitting in his chair and reading his evening newspaper. "Nothing is stolen," he had said. "The intruder leaves only one sign." "What sign?" "The paper is folded incorrectly. Change the lock." I did. It happened again. "Then someone has a key." "No duplicate exists. That is a sentence locksmiths hear often. I have folded newspapers the same way for 40 years, lengthwise, twice. 1 column visible at a time. The person entering my room folds the pages across the middle. What do you want Wolfe to do? Identify who is using the room and why. Tonight I am setting a trap. Police. Number the person is someone in my household. He had invited me to Harrison House at 10. Before hanging up, he added, "If anything happens, remember this. The paper was not folded for reading. It was folded for waiting. Now he was dead." Wolfe listened to my account and pushed the orchid report aside. "Go, you're accepting him as a client." "He requested our help and has been killed before receiving it. The distinction is bureaucratic." That was generous for Wolfe, though he would have objected to the word. Riddle Street was quiet when I arrived. Rain had begun softly, but with plans for expansion. Harrison House stood behind black railings, 3 stories of dark stone and narrow windows. Inspector Reed met me in the entrance hall. He was lean, brown-haired, and looked capable of waiting longer than anyone he questioned. "You're Goodwin. You're well-informed." He led me through the library into Walter Crane's study. Crane had been 71. He was broad-faced, grey-haired, and dressed for dinner. The wound beneath his right ear was narrow enough to have been made by a printing awl or a long steel needle. A cup of tea stood untouched on the side table. His reading glasses rested upon an open book. On the desk, a small clock had stopped at 7:10, though no visible damage explained why. Nothing else appeared disturbed. The evening newspaper lay on the carpet. "Time of death?" I asked. "Between 6:50 and 7:20. Who found him?" "His daughter Helen at 7:30. Weapon? Not found. Door locked. Number closed but unlocked. Windows fastened." I crouched near the paper. The Harrison Gazette had been folded crosswise 3 times. The creases were deep, as if someone had repeatedly pressed them with a thumbnail. One corner carried a smear of black machine grease. Crane's hands clean, then someone else handled it. Or Crane wiped his hands. Why would a newspaperman fold his paper differently on the one evening he was murdered? Reed's mouth moved slightly. He may have been considering a smile, but decided against the expense. A paragraph visible on the outer page had been marked in blue pencil. The Harrison Redevelopment Board will announce tomorrow whether the eastern warehouse lots will be purchased for the city project. Questions remain concerning the present ownership of the land. Crane owned those lots? I asked. Possibly his solicitor is still deciding what he owns. That must make billing interesting. I examined the leather chair. Crane's body occupied the center, but a second depression remained near the right arm. A lighter person had sat there recently. The same black grease marked the leather. The person who folded the paper sat in this chair, I said. Before or after the murder? Before. The leather hasn't recovered. Reed pointed toward the fireplace. A burnt match lay on the hearth. Crane did not smoke. Summonen sat here, read the paper, and waited, Reed said. For Crane, or for something he intended to bring. The household waited in the drawing room. Helen Crane, Walter's daughter, was 38, dark-haired, and controlled enough to make grief look like an official duty. Martin Crane, Walter's nephew, stood beside the window. He was 34, handsome, and irritated by the presence of the law in a house he expected partly to inherit. Arthur Bell, Walter's solicitor, was a heavy man with a carefully trimmed beard. Samuel North had worked with Walter at the Harrison Press for 40 years. Though retired, he still operated the small private printing room in the basement. Ink had permanently entered the lines of his hands. Edith Ward, Walter's secretary, was thin, serious, and left-handed. Ruth Hale, the housekeeper, sat nearest the door. Her husband had once worked for the Harrison Press, though nobody initially mentioned that he had died there. Who took the evening paper to the study? I asked. Edith Ward answered. I did, at 6:45. Was Mr. Crane alone? Yes. Was the paper already folded? Only once, as delivered. Did he fold it while you were there? Number. Where did you go afterward? To the basement office. Samuel North shook his head. She arrived there at 7:05. Edith looked at him. I stopped in the kitchen. The cook left at 6:30, Ruth Hale said. That gave Edith 20 minutes she had tried to fill with a cook who was not present. Who saw Walter after 6:45? Reed asked. No one admitted it. Helen had been upstairs and later remained in the drawing room. Martin claimed he was telephoning from the front parlor. Bell claimed he did not arrive at Harrison House until 9. North was in the basement press room. Ruth moved between the kitchen and upper hall. Each could have reached the study. Why would someone enter merely to read Father's newspaper? Helen asked. Maybe they didn't, I said. Maybe reading was what they did while waiting. For what? That is the better question. I asked about the marked article. Arthur Bell adjusted his spectacles. The Eastern Warehouse property is worth nearly $2 million. Walter controlled it through a private company. Controlled or owned, that depends upon a sealed agreement executed 22 years ago. When will it be opened? Tomorrow. Who benefits? Bell looked toward Helen and Martin. The estate is divided between them, but the warehouse company may belong to someone else. Martin's impatience sharpened. That agreement is nonsense. Uncle Walter owned the land. Then tomorrow should have pleased him, I said. Samuel North spoke. The land belonged to the Harrison Press before the fire. What fire? The old press warehouse burned 22 years ago. A reporter died. Ruth Hale rose from her chair. My husband. Her voice was quiet, but changed the room. What was his name? Reed asked. James Hale. What was he investigating? False property records. He believed someone transferred the warehouse lots while the company's documents were burning. Bell's precise expression did not change. I noticed because everyone else's did. Did Walter Crane know? I asked. He knew everything, Ruth said. He chose what to remember. I telephoned Wolfe from the study. He listened as I described the body. Wrong fold, deep thumbnail marks, machine grease, second chair impression, marked warehouse paragraph, and the 6 people waiting downstairs. Which hand made the final fold? He asked. Left, judging by the pressure. Who is left? Handed. Edith Ward and Samuel North. Martin uses both hands. Too many. Unfold the paper completely. Reed permitted Grant, the police technician. To do it, inside the thick square, concealed by the crosswise fold, was a classified advertisement. Private press records purchased. Harrison material wanted, cash paid. Reply box 417. A blue pencil rectangle surrounded it. The visible mark around the warehouse article was a distraction. The hidden advertisement was the part someone had been studying. Who rented the box? Wolfe asked. Reed called the newspaper office. Box 417 had been purchased with cash under the name Edward Stone. 3 replies had been collected that afternoon by a woman wearing a green coat. Edith Ward wore green. She denied placing the notice. Did Walter know about it? I asked. Her face became pale. Yes, how? He submitted one of the replies himself. What did he offer? An old ledger from the Harrison press fire. Why? He wanted to identify whoever was buying the records. Walter had placed bait in the classified box, then invited the buyer to Harrison House. Reed searched the desk. The reply was missing. But beneath the blotter we found the pressure marks left by Crane's pencil. Grant shaded them lightly. The message appeared, I have the original Harrison fire ledger. Come at 7. Sit in my chair and read the evening paper. I will know you by the fold. Walter Crane had designed the meeting. The intruder had visited the room before. Crane knew the person's folding habit and planned to identify the visitor by the newspaper's shape. Instead, the visitor killed him. Why not simply name the person? Reed asked. He didn't know who it was, I said. He knew only the fold. I telephoned Wolfe again. The advertisement was bait. Crane ordered the buyer to wait in his chair. Then the fold identifies the visitor, Wolfe said. Left-handed, impatient, and carrying machine grease. Not sufficient. What was concealed inside the fold besides the advertisement? Grant examined it under stronger light. A narrow strip of paper had been inserted between 2 pages. It was torn from an old ledger. Most of the writing was missing, but one line remained, transfer authorized by a Bell. Arthur Bell's name, Reed brought the solicitor into the study. Bell studied the strip without touching it. My father's name was Andrew Bell. He represented the Harrison Press at the time of the fire. Did he authorize the land transfer? Reed asked. I don't know. Did you place the classified notice? Number, did you meet Walter tonight? Number, are you left-handed? Number, Bell demonstrated by writing with his right hand. I watched him put the pen down. He had placed it on the left side of the blotter. Wolfe would have liked that, but it proved habit, not murder. Ruth Hale entered carrying a narrow steel tool on a silver tray. I found this beneath the front parlor sofa. It was a printing awl. Samuel North identified it as belonging to the basement press. The point had been wiped, but a dark stain remained inside the handle. Martin Crane said, Edith borrowed that yesterday. Edith said Martin took it this afternoon. The weapon had arrived accompanied by 2 accusations, which made it socially successful and legally uncertain. Grant opened its hollow handle. Inside was another fragment of the fire ledger. This fragment bore Martin Crane's name beside a recent payment of $50,000. Martin stared at it. I have never seen that record. Reed asked, who paid you? I don't know. Most men notice $50,000. It came through a family trust. Controlled by whom? Arthur Bell. Bell turned toward him. That payment concerned your inheritance. Then why is it recorded in a ledger that vanished 22 years ago? Neither man answered. The newspaper had connected the murder to the Harrison fire, the disputed warehouse land, a secret payment, and an old ownership transfer. But the evidence was too carefully distributed. Bell's family name appeared on one fragment. Martin's payment appeared on another. Edith's green coat matched the person who collected the classified replies. Samuel North was left-handed and had access to the printing awl. Ruth Hale's husband had died because of the old records. Helen stood to inherit the land. Every person in Harrison House had been given a reason to fear the newspaper. I telephoned Wolfe a final time. The awl was found in the front parlor, with a ledger fragment inside it. Who found it? Ruth Hale, who had previously searched the room. 2 officers. Then the weapon was placed there after their search, by someone still in the house. Obviously. You think the ledger fragments were planted? I think a murderer who kills for a ledger does not usually tear it into useful accusations and distribute them inside newspapers and weapons. What does the wrong fold tell us? That the person waiting in Mr. Crane's chair did not merely read the advertisement. The paper was folded into a container for the ledger fragment, possibly examine the grease. Grant compared the black mark on the paper with the basement printing machines. It did not match. The press used thick mineral grease. The newspaper carried a lighter oil mixed with graphite. Arthur Bell used the same mixture on the lock of his metal document case. The case stood in the dining room. When Reed opened it, the original Harrison fire ledger was not inside, but the felt lining showed a clean rectangular space exactly the size of the folded newspaper. Someone had used Walter Crane's newspaper to carry the ledger out of the study and conceal it temporarily inside Bell's case. That did not prove Bell had done it. His case had been left unattended during dinner preparations. Reed closed it. The newspaper was folded around the ledger. Yes, I said. The visitor sat in Crane's chair, received or found the ledger, folded the paper around it and waited. For Crane, maybe for another person who never came. Walter's final warning returned to me. The paper was not folded for reading. It was folded for waiting. The chair and newspaper were telling a story, but not yet the same story. One proved that someone had sat in Walter Crane's place. The other proved that person had carried away the secret for which he died. Outside, rain settled over Riddle Street. Inside Harrison House, 6 people remained under police supervision, each listening for the question that would expose what the wrong folded newspaper had concealed. The murderer was still among them, and somewhere in the house, the missing fire ledger was waiting to be read. Chapter 2. The chair that faced the window, Inspector Thomas Reed returned to Walter Crane's study at 8 the next morning and discovered that the dead man's chair had lied by several inches. I was there because Nero Wolfe had instructed me to examine the room in daylight. Wolfe believes artificial light encourages objects to keep secrets. He also believes other people should travel whenever possible. The rain had ended, leaving Riddle Street washed, grey and unfriendly. Harrison House smelled of coffee, damp wool and police. Walter's body had been removed. His high-backed leather chair remained beside the fireplace, marked with a strip of police cloth. The wrong folded evening paper lay beneath glass on the desk. Reed stood near the carpet with a measuring rule. "What have you got?" I asked. The chair was moved. Yesterday, recently, possibly before the murder. The carpet beneath it had faded everywhere except beneath the 4 wooden feet. Those darker rectangles showed the chair's usual position. Its rear feet now stood 4 inches east of the old marks. The front feet had moved 7 inches. Summonen had not merely shifted the chair, Summonen had turned it toward the window. "Family says Walter always faced the fireplace," Reed said. "He disliked drafts and claimed windows were scenery for people without books." Cheerful man. The new angle directed the chair toward the eastern window overlooking a narrow side courtyard. One curtain had been opened only 2 inches. At the height of a seated person's eyes, the curtain edge carried a faint crescent of black oil. The same light oil and graphite had marked the newspaper. The visitor moved the chair, opened the curtain, and watched something outside, I said. Reed went to the window. From the chair, the view was narrow. The courtyard wall blocked most of Riddle Street. Visible through the gap were the side entrance of Harrison House, the lower window of the basement press room, and part of an abandoned printing warehouse across the alley. Which one mattered? He asked. Whichever supplied the waiting with an ending. Grant, the police technician, examined the chair legs. The front right foot carried a fresh chip. Embedded in it was a short green fiber. Edith Ward had worn a green coat. Reed looked at the fiber and then at me. Don't say it. Evidence is again introducing itself. He put it into an envelope anyway. Helen Crane entered with Ruth Hale. Both had been asked to verify the room's ordinary arrangement. Helen stopped at the door. "The chair is wrong, how?" Reed asked. "It always faced the fire. Father placed the right arm parallel to the hearthstone. Did he ever move it toward the window?" "Never. He complained that the light reflected from the newspaper," Ruth agreed. "Every morning, I returned it to the same marks. Mr. Crane noticed if it moved even an inch." "What was his evening routine?" I asked. "Tea at 6, Ruth said. The paper arrived between 6:15 and 6:30. Miss Ward carried it to the study. Mr. Crane normally read until dinner at 7:30, but that evening he ordered us not to disturb him or expect him at dinner. He said he had private appointments and would ring after 9, same chair, same fold. Always. He folded the paper lengthwise twice and read one column at a time. Did he open the curtain? Number at dusk. I closed it myself. What time yesterday? 6:10. Then someone opened it later. Helen looked toward the narrow gap. Father might have opened it if he expected someone. He expected the classified buyer at 7, I said. But he told that person to sit in his chair. Reed lowered himself carefully into the chair without touching its arms. At the altered angle, his eyes aligned with the basement press room window. "Saman sat here and watched the basement," he said. Samuel North was brought upstairs. The retired printer entered, wiping ink from his left hand. He had spent the morning checking the small press under police supervision. "What could be seen through your basement window last evening?" Reed asked. "My work table and the green signal lamp." "What signal lamp?" North looked toward Ruth. "An old system, Walter, and I used at the Harrison press. 1 light meant the proof sheets were ready. 2 meant a machine problem. 3 meant stop the press." "Why keep it here?" "Habit," Walter occasionally printed private papers. He rang from the study, and I answered with the lamp. "Did you signal him last night?" "Number was the lamp used?" North hesitated. "It flashed once at 7:10. Who operated it?" "I don't know. I was in the storage room behind the press. You told us you remained at the machine from 6:40 until 7:20. I was in the press room area." "That is larger than a machine," I said. North's inked fingers tightened around the cloth. "I went into storage for 5 minutes." "From when to when?" 7:05 to 7:10. "Who knew?" "Miss Ward. She came downstairs while I was leaving. Edith Ward had arrived in the basement at 7:05 after 20 unexplained minutes." "Did she operate the signal lamp?" Reed asked. "I did not see her do it." "What happened when it flashed?" "The press started. By itself." The motor switch had been left on. The signal circuit and press relay share an old connection. Someone pressed the lamp key, and the machine turned for several seconds. That explained the specific moment. The press's noise would travel through the house. A person waiting in Walter's chair could watch the green flash and use the machine's sudden clatter to cover movement or murder. "Could the sound conceal a struggle?" Reed asked. "Easily," North replied. "The flywheel shakes the pipes." Walter's estimated time of death included 7:10. Someone had positioned the chair toward the window, watched for the signal lamp, and waited until the press started. During those few seconds of noise, the visitor could attack Walter with the steel awl. "Who knew the circuit worked that way?" I asked. "Walter, me, Edith. Martin played in the basement as a boy. Arthur Bell's father installed the system. Again, the clue had enough owners to form a club. We went to the basement. The press occupied the center of a low-ceilinged room. A green lamp stood beside the window, connected to a brass key switch. The switch carried a fresh smear of the light graphite oil found on the newspaper and Arthur Bell's document case. Reed examined it. "Bell's oil, sold in every hardware shop," I said. On the floor below the switch lay a blue pencil shaving. Walter's desk used blue pencils, but so did the press room. Edith Ward stood in the doorway. I operated the lamp. Samuel North turned toward her. "You said nothing." I was frightened. Reed asked, "Why did you signal the study?" "Mr. Crane ordered me to. He gave me a note at 6:40. 5, it said I should go downstairs and press the signal once at 7:10. Where is the note? I burned it. Why? Because after he died, I realized the signal could have covered the murder. That realization was accurate. I did not know what he planned. Why lie about being in the kitchen? Mr. Crane had ordered me not to tell anyone about the signal. I thought I was helping with his trap. Reed's voice hardened. You supplied the noise that concealed his murder. I supplied it because he instructed me. Did you place the classified advertisement? Number, did you collect the responses wearing a green coat? Yes. That was another admission. Mr. Crane told me to collect them. He wanted the buyer to believe box 417 was secure. Did you read the replies? Number, did you deliver them to Walter? All 3. One was blank. One offered worthless newspapers. The third asked whether he possessed the Harrison Fire ledger. Who wrote it? No name. What kind of paper? Cream-colored stationery with a watermark shaped like a bell. Arthur Bell's legal office used stationery bearing a small bell. The solicitor was invited downstairs. He denied writing the reply. Anion can obtain my office paper, he said. We discard spoiled sheets. Did you know Walter had the fire ledger? Reed asked. Number, did your father transfer the warehouse property after the fire? He handled the company documents. That was not my question. Bell's beard moved as he tightened his jaw. I do not know what he authorized. I examined the green lamp. Its metal shade faced the study window, but a second side of the shade had been polished bright. From the altered chair position, a person could see not only the green flash, but also a reflection in that polished surface. The reflection showed the basement doorway. The visitor in Walter's chair could watch who entered or left the press room without being seen from below. Why would Crane arrange that? Reed asked. He wanted to identify the person who answered his classified trap, I said. Edith collected the responses and supplied the signal. Crane sat elsewhere, watching the chair from hiding. Reed looked at me. Then who sat in the chair? The person he invited. And where was Crane? That was a useful question. We returned to the study. Behind the curtain opposite, the chair was a narrow recess containing a folding stool. Its seat carried Walter Crane's fingerprints. From there, he could observe the visitor without being seen. His plan became clear. The classified buyer would enter at 7 and sit in Walter's chair with the evening paper. Walter would hide in the recess. Edith would flash the green lamp at 7:10, confirming that the trap had reached its arranged moment. Walter would step out and confront the visitor. Instead, Walter ended dead in the chair. The visitor had reversed their positions. Walter must have left the hiding place, Reed said. The visitor attacked him, then placed him in the chair. That explains the second depression, I said. The visitor sat there first. Walter's body occupied it afterward. And the paper? Folded around the fire ledger while the visitor waited. Reed examined the recess. On the folding stool was a small brown stain. Grant tested it and confirmed blood. Walter had been attacked inside or near the hiding place, not while seated in the chair. The murderer moved the body afterward. That explained why the wound's blood ran along the collar at an angle inconsistent with Walter's final position. The chair and corpse had been arranged. I telephoned Wolfe and reported. Then the visitor knew of the trap, Wolfe said. Or discovered Walter behind the curtain. A surprised visitor would flee or struggle. This person waited for the press signal, attacked during the noise, moved the body, folded the ledger into the paper, and planted the visible warehouse mark, that is preparation. The murderer knew Edith would signal at 7:10. Who knew Mr. Crane's instructions to her, Walter and Edith, unless someone read the note before she burned it? His secretary's papers were accessible. Or she lied about burning it. You like Edith? I neither like nor dislike her. I dislike unsupported exclusivity. I told him about the chair's line of sight to the basement doorway. The visitor watched for someone, Wolfe said. Edith, possibly. But Miss Ward had already delivered the paper and gone downstairs. The visitor may have waited to confirm that another person entered the press room. Samuel North, or the person retrieving something stored there. Reed searched the basement storage room again, behind a stack of old type cases. He found a wall safe standing open. It had contained the Harrison fire records until 3 days earlier. The safe's dust showed that a large ledger had been removed. Inside remained one torn envelope addressed to Walter Crane. The letter was gone, but the envelope carried Arthur Bell's office watermark and Martin Crane's fingerprints. Martin claimed he had never seen it. Arthur claimed his office had never sent it. Edith admitted she had delivered it. Samuel North knew the safe combination. Ruth Hale knew the records were stored there. Helen had access to every room. The altered chair had not reduced the suspect list. It had revealed that Walter's trap involved more people than the visitor he invited. At 7:10, the green lamp flashed. The press began roaring. Walter stepped from behind the curtain. Summonet struck with the steel awl, moved him into the chair, wrapped the old ledger in the evening paper, and waited long enough to distribute false clues. The hidden visitor had not entered Harrison House by accident. The chair had been moved to face the window because the visitor needed to see the signal that made murder safe. As I looked from the dark study to the green lamp below, I understood why Walter's last warning had mentioned waiting. The newspaper fold showed what the visitor carried. The chair showed what the visitor watched. Together they told us the murderer knew precisely when the house would become too noisy to hear a man die. Chapter 3. The visitor who read the news the evening newspaper had been folded twice by 2 different people. That was Grant's conclusion after spending Sunday morning with a lens, sidelighting, and more patience than most newspapers deserve. Inspector Thomas Reed brought his report to Nero Wolfe's office shortly before lunch. Wolfe had returned from the plant rooms and was reading correspondence while I sorted the growing collection of statements from Harrison House. Reed placed photographs on my desk. The deep crosswise folds were made after Walter Crane was killed, he said. The paper was wrapped around the Harrison fire ledger. We already knew that, I said. There is an earlier crease. The photograph showed a short diagonal line near the inside edge of the second page. It was faint and shallow, ending in a small half-moon indentation. Summonet gripped the paper with the left hand and folded only the upper pages. Reed continued. Then the fold was opened and flattened before Edith Ward carried the paper to Walter's study. Wolfe looked up. How do you establish the sequence? The shallow crease passes beneath the later folds. Also, the machine oil in the finger mark was pressed into the paper before the blue pencil rectangle was drawn. I said, so someone handled the paper before Walter received it. Some unknown who entered Harrison House between 6:20. When the paper was delivered, and 6:45, when Edith took it upstairs. Who was near the entrance? Ruth Hale was in the kitchen. Helen was upstairs. Martin says he was in the front parlor. Arthur Bell claimed he had not yet arrived. Samuel North was in the basement. Edith collected the paper from the hall table. Wolfe asked, did the visitor enter openly? Bell did. Then he is not the visitor you mean. Reed produced Ruth Hale's amended statement. At approximately 6:30, she heard the side door beside the basement press open and close. No servant admitted using it. The door was self-locking, but Samuel North, Edith Ward, Martin Crane, and Arthur Bell possessed keys. A hidden visitor entered before the arranged meeting at 7, Reed said. Or a known person used a hidden entrance, Wolfe replied. The small crease suggests that person examined the newspaper. For what? Reed had no answer. Wolfe did. For a message. He rang for Fritz and requested the previous 6 evening editions of the Harrison Gazette. I went to the corner newsstand and returned with what remained of them. Fritz ironed the folded pages under clean cloth at low heat, an operation that offended him because newspaper ink was not food and therefore had no honorable business in the kitchen. We spread the editions across the office table. Walter Crane had told me that the intruder repeatedly entered his study and refolded his newspaper. The visits had begun 3 weeks earlier. The same period covered the 6 editions before us. Each contained tiny blue marks, besides selected lines. They were not ordinary pencil marks. Some were dots, some short strokes, and some small hooks. Each appeared beside an article connected to city property, the Harrison Press, or old warehouse records. Reed bent over them. Crane used the evening paper to receive information. From whom? I asked. Wolfe examined the marks through a lens. These were placed before delivery. How can you tell? Several lie beneath undisturbed printing ink transferred from the opposite page. The markings were made while the papers remained warm and stacked. Someone at the newspaper office, or at the distribution room. Samuel North still knew employees at the Gazette. Walter Crane had once owned part of it. Edith Ward collected his paper personally on some evenings. Arthur Bell's law office advertised in it. Martin Crane served on its business board. Again, the route had several travelers. Nell Hart, the Gazette's night editor, came to the brownstone at Reed's request. She was a thin woman with short grey hair and a voice trained to dismiss bad headlines. She recognized the symbols. Proofreader's marks, she said, not used correctly, but made to resemble them. What do they mean? Reed asked. Taken separately, nothing, perhaps instructions for folding. Wolfe's eyes moved toward the wrong, shaped paper beneath glass. Precisely. We copied the markings onto a clean sheet and folded it according to their positions. The first lengthwise fold aligned 2 dots. The second brought a hook over a short line, when properly folded in Walter's usual narrow shape. Small openings cut into the margin revealed selected letters from 4 different columns. They formed a sentence. The ledger in the safe is a copy. Original record rests with the second plate. The office became quiet. Reed read it twice. Second printing plate. Nell Hart nodded. Old newspapers were printed from paired metal plates. If the Harrison Fire edition had 2 versions, one may contain information removed from the public copy, Wolfe said. Mr. Crane's unusual folding habit was not merely preference, it was a cipher. Walter folded the newspaper lengthwise because that shape aligned the marks. Someone else knew. Messages were hidden in the pages, but did not know the correct pattern. That person tried crosswise folds while searching for the words. The wrong fold was not careless. It was an unsuccessful attempt to read Walter's code. Reed telephoned Harrison House and ordered the basement searched for old printing plates. Samuel North objected until Reed mentioned a warrant. Then he remembered a locked cabinet behind the press. The cabinet contained dozens of metal plates wrapped in paper. 2 were labeled with the date of the Harrison warehouse fire. One displayed the edition published the morning after the fire. Its headline reported the death of James Hale and the destruction of the property records. The second plate carried an earlier version that had never been printed. Its main article stated that reporter James Hale had survived the initial blaze and accused Andrew Bell, Arthur's father, of removing the company ledger before the building collapsed. The final paragraph had been scratched away with a metal tool. Who altered the plate? Reed asked Samuel North. I don't know. You stored it for 22 years. Walter ordered me to preserve it. Who knew? Walter, me, and Edith. Martin saw the plate cabinet once. Arthur Bell came looking for old fire records last month. Bell had denied knowing Walter possessed any. The second plate proved his denial false. Inside the cabinet, Grant found the torn classified response Walter had sent to Box 417. It invited the buyer to come at 7, sit in the chair, and wait with the evening paper. A fingerprint remained on the corner. It belonged to Martin Crane. Martin was brought to the brownstone. He sat in the red leather chair with resentment showing through his expensive manners. I found the note on Uncle Walter's desk, he said. When? Reed asked. Yesterday afternoon. Why did you touch it? I read it. Why didn't you mention it? Because it looked like a trap, and I did not want him to know I had seen it. Did you enter through the side door at 6:30? Number did you know about the newspaper code? Martin hesitated. I knew Uncle folded papers to reveal selected columns. I did not know the exact system. Could you identify a hidden message? Not without trying several folds. That was close enough to the truth to be dangerous. Wolfe asked, what did your uncle intend to reveal when the warehouse agreement was opened? Martin's face tightened. That Arthur Bell's father stole the land. Arthur Bell had prepared the legal documents transferring the lots after the fire. Martin claimed Bell's family later used Walter's ownership as a shield. while retaining secret control of the property. "Why would that endanger you?" Wolfe asked. "Because my trust receives income from the warehouse company. If the transfer was illegal, I lose it." A motive, a financial concern, not a reason for murder. The distinction comforts many heirs. Martin stood. Reed told him to sit. Grant entered, carrying the original murder newspaper in a clear case. Under stronger magnification, he had identified the half-moon indentation beside the shallow crease. It was not made by a fingernail. It was made by the raised edge of a signet ring. The mark showed part of a letter. H. Walter Crane wore no ring. Arthur Bell wore one bearing a bell. Martin Crane wore one carved with the Harrison family crest, an H inside a square. He removed it slowly. Reed compared the edge with the crease. The size matched. Martin stared at the newspaper. "I handled it in the hall," he admitted. "When?" Reed asked. "At 6:25. I saw the blue marks and tried to read them." "Why lie? Were you?" "Number." I unfolded the paper before Edith collected it. "What did the message say?" "I couldn't solve it." "Did you leave the house through the side door?" "Number." The ring established that Martin made the first shallow crease. It did not establish that he returned at 7, killed Walter, and made the deep folds around the ledger. Two separate sets of folds could belong to the same person, or two people. Wolfe examined the signet mark and grunted. Mr. Crane's visitor was searching for the coded message before the murder. The killer later used the same paper to carry the ledger. You continue to assume those acts were performed by one person. Reed looked at him. You think Martin searched the paper, but someone else killed Walter. I think the facts permit it. Then who entered through the side door? That remains to be learned. The side entrance lock had been wiped, but Grant found a fragment of cream-colored paper trapped beneath the threshold. It bore the same Bell watermark as Arthur Bell's office stationery. Bell claimed the paper could have come from any discarded letter. Edith Ward claimed Bell arrived through the front entrance shortly before 9 Samuel. North said he heard someone cross the basement at 6:30. Ruth Hale said the footsteps were too light for Bell. Helen said Martin had been in the front parlor. Martin admitted handling the newspaper, but denied using the side door. The visitor who entered early had known the paper might contain a message. Martin had tried and failed to read it. Someone else may have followed the correct folding marks and learned that the ledger in the safe was false. That person now knew where to search for the original evidence, the second printing plate. But when Reed reopened the plate cabinet, the early fireplate was gone. In its place lay the evening newspaper, folded lengthwise in Walter Crane's exact manner. Across the visible column, someone had written, "You read the message too late. The wrong fold had exposed the hidden visitor. The correct fold now told us the visitor had returned." Chapter 4. The message between the pages. The evening newspaper had already been examined by Inspector Thomas Reed, 2 officers, and a police photographer. That did not prevent Wolfe from regarding it as though no competent eyes had yet been applied to it. Reed brought the paper to our office on West 35th Street shortly after 9. Rain tapped the windows. Fritz was clearing away the remains of Wolfe's dinner, and the orchids overhead were enjoying a peace denied to the rest of us. Wolfe opened the evidence folder, but did not touch the paper. "This was found in Walter Crane's study?" he asked. "Beside the chair," Reed said. It had been folded across the middle by the visitor. Walter always folded it lengthwise, and the visitor sat in Walter's chair. The chair had been moved toward the window. Whoever sat there could watch the basement entrance and wait for the signal from Edith Ward. Wolfe's lips pushed forward. Then the newspaper occupied the visitor's hands while he waited. It may also have occupied his mind. I placed the 6 earlier newspapers from Walter's study on the desk. Each carried small blue marks beside apparently unimportant words. We had already discovered that Walter used those marks as a private code. When the pages were folded in his usual manner, selected words joined to form a message. That message had led us to the old Harrison press plate concerning the warehouse fire of 22 years earlier. Before Reed could remove the plate, someone had stolen it and left another newspaper in its place. Reed pointed to the evening paper. The laboratory found nothing hidden inside it. Laboratories find what they are instructed to seek, Wolfe said. Walter Crane expected a particular reader, therefore the paper was prepared for that reader. He asked me for a ruler, a magnifying glass, and a sheet of plain paper. I supplied them. Wolfe studied the folds first, then the blue pencil marks, and finally the rough edges of the pages. Near the inside crease was a tiny black stroke. It looked like a printer's defect, but under the glass it proved to be graphite, drawn over a pinprick. Reed leaned closer. "We missed that." "You saw it," Wolfe said. "You merely decided it meant nothing." He unfolded the newspaper once. The pinprick passed through 4 pages. On each page it touched a different item. The number 20, 2 in a building notice, the word fire in an insurance advertisement, the name Harrison in a death notice, and the number 4 in a theater schedule. 20, 2 years, I said. The Harrison fire, October 4th. Possibly, Wolfe said. Do not convert a possibility into a fact merely because it pleases you. Your Reed took out his notebook. The fire occurred on October 4th, 22 years ago. Walter was pointing to that date. But to what on that date? I asked. Wolfe folded the newspaper lengthwise as Walter always had. The 4 marked items disappeared inside the fold. A narrow strip of the editorial page remained visible. Halfway down it, someone had drawn a faint line beneath the words 4th edition in an article about newspaper circulation. Reed stood, the Harrison Evening Record. Wolfe nodded. Walter was directing his visitor to the 4th edition printed on the night of the warehouse fire. The city archive remained open until 10, so Reed and I left immediately. Wolfe stayed where nature had placed him, which was behind his desk. He instructed us to telephone when we had something worth interrupting him for. The archive occupied the basement of the old courthouse. Nell Hart, the night editor, who had helped us understand Walter's newspaper code, met us among shelves of bound papers. She listened without interrupting, then led us to the records for the year of the fire. There were 3 editions on October 4th, she said. Walter's mark says 4, Reed replied. Then Walter knew something the catalogue does not. Nell opened the thick volume. The 1st edition reported the fire as a minor warehouse blaze. The 2nd said 1 worker was missing. The 3rd announced that James Hale, the night watchman and husband of Ruth Hale, was presumed dead. After that came the morning issue of October 5th. Reed examined the binding. Between the 3rd edition and the following morning's paper was the ragged edge of a missing section. Something was cut out, he said. Long ago, Nell replied. The exposed paper has darkened. She checked an old production ledger in faded ink. The night foreman had entered 4 print runs for October 4th. The number beside the final run had been crossed out, but it could still be read. 800 copies. A 4th edition existed, I said. 800 copies, and none reached the archive. Nell's expression tightened. Summoney stopped it before distribution. Under a low lamp, Reed found impressions on the page beneath the missing one. Someone had written on the 4th edition, while it still rested inside the bound volume. We could make out only 5 words. Copy kept with household accounts. Beneath them were the initials Walter Crane, Reed said. Harrison House was still under guard when we returned. Helen Crane and her cousin Martin waited in the parlor with Arthur Bell, the family solicitor. Edith Ward sat near the cold fireplace. Samuel North, the retired printer, stood by the window. Ruth Hale remained apart from them, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Reed explained what we had discovered. The household accounts are kept at my office, Arthur Bell said. He had a careful beard and the manner of a man who charged by the minute, even when denying murder. For how long? Reed asked. More than 30 years. Who could reach them? Walter, myself, and authorized clerks. Edith looked up. I was one of those clerks before Walter hired me. Martin gave her a sharp glance. You never mentioned that. It was no secret. In this house, I said, a thing doesn't have to be secret. It only has to be overlooked. Reed sent 2 officers to Bell's office. They returned with 12 grey account boxes. The papers from the year of the warehouse fire were arranged by month, but October was missing. At the bottom of the box lay a clean rectangular patch surrounded by dust. Something flat had rested there until recently. Samuel North bent over it, a newspaper wrapped between boards. Reed turned. How do you know? That was how Harrison Press preserved special editions. A fourth edition. North's face changed, and Ruth Hale noticed. You knew about it, she said. North did not answer. Ruth rose. My husband died in that fire. If another newspaper was printed... What did it say? North stared at the floor. That James did not die in the warehouse. Nobody moved. Ruth's voice became quieter. What are you saying? He came out through the eastern loading door after the first collapse. He was burned, but he could walk. He told Walter that Andrew Bell had removed the company ledger before the fire and altered the ownership records for the eastern warehouse land. Arthur Bell stiffened. My father cannot defend himself against this. North looked at him. Your father paid me $5,000 to keep silent, and you took it? For 3 days, then I returned it. Ruth stepped toward him. You let me bury an empty coffin. Walter promised to print James's accusation. The fourth edition was prepared. Before the delivery trucks left, James disappeared, and every copy was taken. Who stopped the trucks? Reed asked. Andrew Bell and Walter, they said. James had fled because he started the fire. Did you believe that? Reed searched the account box again beneath the wooden shelf. He found a short length of black cord with a flake of green sealing wax attached. Bell used green wax on private legal packets. Edith wore a green stone ring and had once filed the household accounts. The clue pointed conveniently in 2 directions, which meant it was not yet a clue anyone could trust. An officer then found an old envelope behind the cabinet. Walter had written across it, for the person who reads what was never printed. Below that were 4 names: Andrew Bell, Walter Crane, James Hale, Samuel North. The envelope was empty. I telephoned Wolfe and gave him the facts. He listened without comment until I finished. The fourth edition accused Andrew Bell, I said. Someone erased it from the archive, stopped its delivery, and recently stole Walter's only surviving copy. Then Mr. Crane's visitor found the newspaper message, Wolfe said. That's how it looks. Look again. The visitor folded the paper incorrectly before the murder. He was searching the pages but did not understand Walter's method. Someone later folded it correctly and placed it where you would examine it. So there were 2 readers. There were at least 2 attempts to read it. Whether they were made by one person or 2 remains unsettled. Reed took the receiver from me. Why kill Walter now over a fire 22 years old? Because Walter had discovered something new, Wolfe replied. The old article was dangerous, but it was not sufficient. Andrew Bell is dead. Land fraud, committed by a dead man, may ruin reputations, but it rarely provokes immediate murder. What would? What happened to James Hale after he survived the fire? Across the room, Ruth Hale had heard enough to understand. Her face lost what little color remained in it. You think James was murdered that night? Wolfe's voice carried from the receiver. I think Walter Crane learned why James Hale never returned home. He used newspapers to conceal the discovery, and someone entered his house to find it. Walter's evening paper was not an object he read for amusement. It was a lock, a map, and a challenge. Reed looked at the empty envelope and the missing month of accounts. The visitor killed him before finding the 4th edition. Perhaps, Wolfe said, but someone found it afterward. Outside, rain ran down the windows of Harrison House. Inside, every person in the parlor watched the others. Walter Crane had spent years placing truths between ordinary pages, trusting that only the right reader would recognize them. On the night he died, one visitor sat in his chair searching for the message. Another hand, or perhaps the same hand after learning the secret, removed the last surviving record of the forgotten fire. The newspaper had finally been read. The question was whether we had read it before its message became another reason to kill. Chapter 5. The seat of the silent witness, Inspector Thomas Reed, began the next morning by assembling everyone who had reason to dislike Walter Crane. Since Walter had spent 71 years collecting enemies with the care other men gave to stamps, the parlor at Harrison House became crowded before 10. Helen Crane sat near the fireplace, dressed in black and looking more angry than bereaved. Her cousin Martin stood behind her chair. Arthur Bell, the family solicitor, occupied the sofa with his document case at his feet. Edith Ward sat upright beside the writing table. Ruth Hale remained near the door, while Samuel North, Walter's former business partner at Harrison Press, preferred the window. I was there on behalf of Nero Wolfe, who regarded morning travel as an offense against civilization. Wolfe had sent me to collect facts, expressions, contradictions, and, if possible, a murderer, Reed, faced the group. Walter Crane reopened his investigation of the Harrison warehouse fire 3 weeks before his death. I want to know what each of you feared he might discover. Helen answered first. I feared nothing. That makes you unusual, I said. She ignored me. My father was secretive, but secrecy was his pleasure. It did not mean every private paper contained a crime. Martin spoke from behind her. He planned to challenge the ownership of the Eastern warehouse lots. If he succeeded, the Crane family trust might lose nearly $2 million. Your income comes from that trust, Reed said. Yes. So you had a reason to stop him. I had a reason to argue with him. That isn't the same thing. Arthur Bell adjusted one cuff. Walter also intended to accuse my father of altering the warehouse records. Such an accusation would have damaged my firm. And your position as trustee, Reed added. My position is irrelevant. No, I said. It pays well, that makes it relevant. Edith admitted that Walter had discovered missing payments among the old press accounts. Ruth said she wanted the truth about her husband, but had also feared what it might reveal. If James Hale had set the fire, as Walter once claimed, Ruth would have spent 22 years defending a guilty man. Samuel North said nothing. Reed turned to him. You were more than Walter's printer. You owned a quarter of Harrison Press. Until he bought me out. When? 6 months after the fire. At a fair price. North's mouth bent. Walter did not believe in fair prices. Then you also had reason to resent him. I resented him every day for 22 years. If resentment killed, Riddle Street would have needed a larger cemetery. Reed placed the empty envelope from the account box on the table. Walter had written 4 names upon it: Andrew Bell, Walter Crane, James Hale, and Samuel North. You admitted that James survived the fire, Reed said. What else did he tell you? North looked toward Ruth. Nothing that would help. That answer usually means the opposite, I said. Ruth crossed the room and stood before him. You watched me bury an empty coffin. You will not decide what I am allowed to hear. North's shoulders dropped. James said the fire was started to destroy records, he admitted. Andrew Bell had altered the ownership agreement, but the original figures remained in the company ledger. James caught him removing it from the warehouse office. Where was Walter? Reed asked. In the press room, Walter prepared the 4th edition from James's statement. Then why suppress it? Because Andrew Bell threatened him, not with prison, with ruin. Bell had proof that Walter used press money to buy the warehouse land through another company. Arthur Bell looked sharply at North. That is a lie. Your father's favorite kind, North replied. A useful one. Reed, let the silence work. It did better than shouting would have. At last North continued. Walter agreed to stop the 4th edition. He said it was temporary, that he would gather enough evidence to expose Bell without destroying himself. Instead, James disappeared. Walter spent the next 22 years pretending the matter was closed. Until 3 weeks ago, Reed said. North nodded. Walter came to my workshop. He said he had found the missing company ledger, or enough of it to prove what happened. He asked whether I would testify. What did you tell him? That I would. Who knew about that conversation? No one. Edith spoke quietly. That is not true. Every face turned toward her. She said, Walter dictated a memorandum afterward. He named Mr. North as a witness. I typed it. Where is it? Reed asked. In the study safe. Or it was. The safe had contained no memorandum when the police searched it. Reed led us upstairs to the study. Walter's leather chair remained where the police had marked it, angled slightly toward the eastern window. That position had supported our first theory. The hidden visitor sat there to watch the basement door and wait for Edith's green signal lamp. Reed crouched beside the chair. The rug beneath it had been removed for laboratory work, exposing the wooden floor. 4 shallow depressions showed where the chair had stood for years. But there was another set. The rear legs had left fresh curved scratches nearly 2 feet away. In that position, the chair had not faced the window. It had faced the study doorway. Reed measured both sets of marks. The chair was moved twice, he said. Ruth nodded. Walter sometimes turned it toward the door when he expected someone. Why? I asked. He disliked being approached from behind. That was sensible, especially for a man who had spent decades preserving dangerous secrets. Reed placed the chair over the fresh scratches. It faced the doorway directly. Anyone entering the study would have found Walter seated upright, watching him. The desk stood at Walter's right hand, and the curtain recess where blood had been discovered was behind him. He wasn't hiding behind the curtain when the visitor arrived, Reed said. Our earlier reconstruction was wrong. I examined the arms of the chair. The left arm had a new scrape in the leather, and a dark thread clung to one brass nail. The right arm carried a faint smear of blood that had been partly wiped away. Walter had been sitting in the chair when the confrontation began, but not in the position where his body was found. Reed called the photographer. Then he turned the chair back toward the window, matching the marks made after the murder. Once Walter was dead, he said. The killer rotated the chair, placed the body in it, and arranged the newspaper beside him. It made Walter appear to have been reading peacefully when he was attacked. Except the newspaper was folded incorrectly, I said. And the body had to be moved. Reed pointed to a narrow drag mark on the floor. It ran from the doorway side of the chair toward the curtain recess. Walter had risen or been pulled up during the struggle. He had received the fatal wound near the recess, collapsed, and then been carried back. The chair had witnessed the entire performance. It had faced the murderer when Walter was alive, and the window when Walter was dead. Grant. The police technician arrived with his case. He removed the thread from the chair arm and examined it through a lens. Dark brown wool, he said. Good quality, probably from a coat sleeve. Arthur Bell wore a brown wool coat the night of the murder. So had Samuel North. Martin had worn grey, Edith green, Helen blue, and Ruth black. Arthur saw where Reed was looking. My coat is already in police custody. So is Mr. North's, Reed said. Grant compared the thread first with Arthur's coat. The color was close, but the weave differed. Arthur's coat used a tight double thread. The fragment from the chair was looser. Samuel North's coat had the correct weave. More important, the right cuff had a fresh tear. Ruth made a small sound. North stared at his sleeve, as if it belonged to somebody else. Reed said, You sat opposite Walter while the chair faced the door. There was a struggle, and your cuff caught on the arm. Number you knew about the 4th edition. You knew Walter had reopened the investigation. You had been his partner, and he cheated you after the fire. I did not kill him. Then explained the thread. North looked toward the eastern window. I came here that evening. Helen rose. You told us you were in the basement. I entered the study at 6:40. Walter had sent for me. He was sitting in that chair facing the door. What did he want? Reed demanded. North hesitated. I said, Mr. North, your coat has already answered one question. If you make it answer the others, you may not like its choice of words. North sank into the desk chair. Walter showed me the evening newspaper, he said. He told me the marks would lead to the surviving 4th edition. He wanted me to confirm James's statement before he exposed everything. Did you agree? Yes. Did you struggle with him? North touched his torn cuff. He caught my arm when I tried to take the paper. I wanted to see the message. Walter refused. He said he could no longer trust me. Why not? Because someone had removed the original ledger from his safe. Reed's eyes narrowed. Did you take it? Number I left at 6:50. Walter was alive. Through which door? The basement entrance. I did not want the family to see me. That explained the side door. Ruth had heard, and the machine oil on the first shallow crease of the newspaper. North had handled it before Martin added the half-moon mark with his signet ring. 2 men had secretly examined Walter's paper before the murder. Neither admitted making the deep crosswise folds found beside the body. Reed telephoned Wolfe from the study. I listened on the extension as he described the chair marks, the thread, and North's admission. When Reed finished, Wolfe said, "Mr. North is lying." North, close enough to hear, stiffened. "About the murder?" Reed asked. "Not necessarily. He is lying about why Walter seized his sleeve. A man guarding a newspaper does not commonly grasp another man's cuff with enough force to tear it." "Then what happened?" "Mr. Crane tried to prevent North from leaving or from taking something more important than the newspaper. The ledger, possibly, but remember the chair. Its position proves Walter expected the visitor and intended to see his face. After the murder, the chair was turned toward the window to support a false story. The murderer did not merely move a body. He altered the direction in which the dead man appeared to be looking." Reed glanced at the eastern window. Wolfe continued, "A staged room reveals what the culprit once believed. He wanted you to believe Walter had been watching the basement. Therefore, you must ask what Walter was actually watching when the chair faced the doorway." "The person entering," Reed said. "More precisely, what that person carried." Reed looked at North's hands. One of them bore a pale rectangular mark across the palm, the sort left by a cord pulled tight around a flat parcel. The missing 4th edition had been preserved between boards and tied with black cord. North closed his fist, but he was too late. The chair had faced him while Walter was alive. The torn thread proved he had stood within reach. The mark on his palm showed he had recently carried a bound packet, like the one stolen from the household accounts. Samuel North might not have killed Walter Crane, but when he left the study at 6:50, he had taken part of the truth with him. Chapter 6, the fold that revealed the truth. Samuel North remained in Walter Crane's study with his fist closed, and 6 pairs of eyes fixed on it. The pale line across his palm had been made by a cord drawn tight around something flat, and the missing 4th edition of the Harrison Evening Record had been stored between boards and tied with black cord. Inspector Thomas Reed did not waste time asking whether that was a coincidence. "Where is the newspaper?" he demanded. North looked at Ruth Hale, then at the floor. "I burned it." Ruth crossed the room before anyone could stop her and struck him. It was not a theatrical slap. It landed hard enough to turn his head. "You burned the only account of what happened to James." Number North touched his cheek. "I burned the wrapper and the boards. I hid the paper." "Where?" "In my workshop." Reed sent 2 officers to retrieve it. North was taken downstairs and placed under guard. I telephoned Wolfe, who received the news with a grunt. "Mr. North stole the old edition," I said. "That gives him a fair claim to being our murderer. It gives him a claim to theft. He was with Walter shortly before the killing. His thread was on the chair. Those facts prove his presence, which he now admits. They do not prove he returned and killed Mr. Crane. He lied. So has everyone in that house, including you, when Miss Crane asked whether Mr. Reed intended to arrest her cousin. That was diplomacy. It was a lie wearing a clean collar. He hung up before I could improve the definition. The officers returned from North's workshop with a flat packet wrapped in brown paper. Inside was the surviving 4th edition from the night of the warehouse fire. 22 years had turned the pages yellow and brittle, but the headline remained black and fierce. "Watchman survives." Harrison Fire Claims Company records were removed. The article named James Hale and reported his accusation against Andrew Bell. It also said James would make a sworn statement the following morning. He had disappeared before morning came. Reed read the article twice, then placed it in an evidence folder. "Why steal it?" he asked North. "Walter told me someone had already searched his safe. I thought the paper would be safer with me. You hid evidence and lied about it." I had kept silent once. I would not let Andrew Bell's son destroy the truth as his father did. Arthur Bell's expression remained controlled. You have no evidence that I searched anything. North looked at him. Your office held the newspaper. It was stored among Walter's accounts. That does not mean I knew it was there. Reed dismissed everyone, except Edith Ward and Ruth Hale. He wanted a complete account of Walter's newspaper habits, beginning with delivery and ending with disposal. Ruth supplied the routine. The evening paper arrived at 6. She placed it on the silver tray in the hall. Edith carried it to the study at 6:40. Walter opened it fully upon his desk, marked anything that interested him with a blue pencil, and folded it lengthwise twice. That left one narrow column facing outward. He never folded it across the middle? Reed asked. Never, Ruth said. He said cross. Folding broke the type and made a paper untidy. Edith nodded. Walter believed a man's method of folding a newspaper revealed his character. I looked at the thick square found beside his body. Then he would have considered the murderer morally unfit for public transportation. Reed laid the evening paper beside 3 older issues from Walter's study. The habitual folds were sharp, narrow, and even. The folds made on the murder night were broad and crosswise, turning the paper into a compact packet. Grant examined them under angled light. The lengthwise folds were made first, he said. Hawes earlier, probably by Crane. The crosswise folds came later. After North left, Reed asked. Likely the paper was folded across the middle around something flat. We already know a fragment of the missing ledger was carried inside it. That mattered. North had tried to take the newspaper during his quarrel with Walter, but he knew Walter's system. If North had returned to search it, he would have unfolded it along the established creases. He would not have made the broad cross, fold that betrayed the hidden visitor. The person who searched the paper after Walter's death did not understand how Walter handled it. Reed asked Edith to demonstrate the routine. She opened a fresh newspaper on the desk, marked a column, folded the sheet lengthwise, and pressed the crease with the side of her thumb. Ruth did the same. So did Helen and Martin when Reed called them back. All 3 had seen Walter perform the act hundreds of times. Samuel North had used the method when he worked at Harrison Press. Arthur Bell produced an impatient smile. I do not study how my clients fold newspapers. He opened the fresh paper and folded it across the middle. Nobody spoke for a moment. Bell looked down at his hands. You asked me to fold it, not imitate Walter. Exactly, Reed said. That is how you naturally fold a newspaper. It is how thousands of men fold one. One of those men killed Walter. Bell dropped the paper on the desk. This is absurd. It is not proof, Reed said, but it is a fact. Wolfe arrived at that point, or as close as Wolfe came to arriving anywhere outside the brownstone. His voice came through the study telephone after Reed called him. Have Mr. Goodwin describe the folds precisely, he ordered. I did. The first cross, fold ran below the newspaper's center. The second brought the lower right corner over the editorial page. It was an awkward arrangement if the object was merely to make the paper smaller. Then the culprit was not folding it for convenience, Wolfe said. He was following something. Reed frowned. Following what? The marks Walter's visitor knew the newspaper contained a message, but did not know how to align the marked words. He tried different folds until certain marks met. I spread the evening paper flat. 3 blue strokes and the pinprick had already directed us toward the 4th edition of the old fire report. But the murderer's second cross, fold brought together another set of marks. A short line beside a shipping notice, a circle around the word East, and a blue hook beside a report about a demolished church. When those marks touched, the folded pages formed a small rectangle. Inside, it was the classified advertisement Walter had placed as bait private press records purchased. Harrison material wanted. Cash paid. Reply, Box 417. The murderer had folded the newspaper around that advertisement. While searching for Walter's code, Grant placed the sheet beneath a strong lamp. The pressure of the cross fold had exposed something we had not seen earlier. Faint writing transferred from the opposite page. Walter had written heavily upon a sheet laid over the newspaper, and the pencil had impressed the words into the newsprint. Reed read them aloud. Bell arrives 9 north at 6:40. M at 7. E knows signal. Martin stepped forward. The letter M means me. Probably, Reed said. And E is Edith? Edith's face had gone pale. I knew about the green lamp, but not the rest. Bell pointed to the first line. It says I was expected at 9. Walter was dead before then. It establishes your appointment, Reed said. It does not establish when you entered the house. There, he said. At the rear of the photograph, partly hidden by Bell's shoulder, stood an elderly man holding a book. His face was blurred, but his right hand rested on the back of a chair. The smallest finger ended at the first joint. Edith identified him immediately. That is my father. You cannot see his face clearly, Reed warned. I know the way he holds his wrist. The burn tightened the skin. He always kept his hand turned inward. Arthur Bell was brought to the brownstone shortly before noon. He looked at the photograph and denied recognizing the man. I visit hundreds of residents each year. Ashbrook House has 32, I said. Your memory must tire easily. Bell ignored me. The photograph proves nothing. Wolfe regarded him from behind his desk. It proves that Peter Ward may be alive in an institution financed by your foundation. It also proves that Walter Crane marked the article before he was murdered. Then ask the home who the man is. We shall. Bell rose. Until you do, I have no reason to remain. You have several, Reed said. Sit down. Bell sat, but he did it in a way that suggested the chair had received an order from him. Reed telephoned Ashbrook House. The director identified the man in the photograph as Paul Webb, a resident who had lived there for 22 years. Webb suffered from memory loss, following severe head injuries and burns. His fees had originally been paid by the late Andrew Bell for the past 12 years. They had been paid by Arthur Bell's private trust account. Edith stared at him. You knew. Bell's face remained still. I knew my father supported an injured man. I did not know his true identity. Your payments kept him under a false name, Reed said. I continued, a charitable arrangement. Wolfe sighed. Charity, sir, is an inadequate name for financing the concealment of a witness. Bell stood again. This time Reed permitted him to leave the office. Though 2 policemen followed him, we drove to Ashbrook House. It stood beyond the northern edge of the city, surrounded by bare trees and stone walls. Peter Ward occupied a small room overlooking the garden. He was 73, thin and white, haired, with a deep scar across his right temple. Edith entered alone. Reed and I watched through the open doorway. For several seconds Peter showed no recognition. Then Edith told him her name. His damaged hand trembled. Little Edie. She knelt beside his chair. That reunion belonged to them. So Reed closed the door. The director gave us Peter's records. He had been admitted on the morning after the warehouse fire by Andrew Bell and Walter Crane. Both men signed the papers. Peter was listed as an unidentified vagrant found near the river. Why was the name changed to Paul Webb? Reed asked. Mr. Bell supplied it. He said the patient became distressed by questions about his past. Did Arthur Bell visit him? Twice a year, more frequently during the last month. That was when Walter reopened the investigation. Peter's memory came in fragments. He remembered driving the 4th edition away from Harrison Press. A car blocked him near the river. Andrew Bell pulled him from the truck. Walter arrived moments later. Then there had been a blow, darkness, and years without names. Did Walter strike you? Reed asked. Peter pressed his damaged hand against his forehead. Number Bell struck. Walter watched. What happened to James Hale? Peter closed his eyes. James followed the truck. He had the ledger. Where did he go? I don't know, Edith asked softly. Why didn't you come home? Peter looked around the small room as if seeing its walls for the first time. They told me I had no home. Walter and Andrew Bell had buried a living witness, more effectively than they buried the 4th edition. Walter's later remorse did not erase 22 years stolen from Peter Ward and his family. Before we left, Peter gave Reed one more detail. Walter came yesterday morning, he said. The day he died? Yes. He brought a newspaper proof. What was printed on it? Everything. My name. James's name, Bell's name. Walter said the city would read it tomorrow. That explained the urgency. Walter had prepared an article exposing the altered warehouse records, the suppression of the 4th edition, and the concealment of Peter Ward. He intended to release it the morning after his death. The killer had searched the evening paper because Walter's markings revealed where the supporting evidence could be found. Back at Harrison House, Reed and I examined the evening paper again. The Society article had a narrow border around it. At first it appeared decorative, but one section was thicker than the rest. Grant separated 2 pages that had stuck together along the fold. Between them lay a strip of thin proof paper, no wider than a ribbon. It contained part of Walter's unpublished article. For 22 years, attorney Andrew Bell's son has continued payments for Peter Ward under the false name Paul Webb. Records held by this newspaper show that Arthur Bell knew the patient's identity and required Ashbrook House to deny all inquiries from the Ward family. Beneath the paragraph was a payment reference number Reed called Ashbrook House. The number matched Arthur Bell's account. Walter had hidden a fragment of the final article inside the marked newspaper. The killer searched the pages and removed the larger proof, but the narrow strip remained trapped in the fold. Bell knew Peter's identity, Reed said. This proves it. It proves he continued the concealment, I said. Not that he killed Walter. The killer came for this article. Yes, but someone else could also be named in the missing portion. We searched Walter's desk for the remaining proof. In the wastebasket were scraps from a typed draft, all burned around the edges. Grant arranged them on a glass sheet. Only one complete sentence could be restored. The responsibility did not end with Andrew Bell, nor did it remain within his family. That sentence widened the circle again. Samuel North had accepted money for his silence. Walter had suppressed the truth. Edith had searched the paper for Arthur. Martin's trust benefited from the stolen property. Helen inherited Walter's share. Ruth had a personal reason to punish the men who condemned James. The final article exposed more than Arthur Bell. Reed returned to the newspaper. Walter's blue pencil had marked the first letter of 7 lines in the Society report. Read downward, they formed tomorrow beside the last letter. Walter had written the figure 8. Nell Hart explained it when Reed telephoned her. Walter had reserved 8 columns on the front page of the next morning's independent news sheet. He planned to publish his complete account. At 6 the draft and printing plates were missing. The killer had less than 1 night to prevent the story from appearing. He entered Harrison House before Walter returned, searched the newspaper, demanded the evidence, and killed him when he refused to surrender it. Wolfe listened to my report that evening from behind his desk. Walter's last article had 2 purposes, he said. It would confess his own cowardice and expose those who profited from it. Arthur Bell at the front of the line. Perhaps. But the murderer removed the complete proof while overlooking the strip caught between the pages. That carelessness is useful. How? The surviving strip tells us what the killer feared you would learn. The missing portion will tell us whom Walter feared. We don't have the missing portion. Number, but we have the newspaper. He picked up the evening edition and folded it once along Walter's narrow lengthwise crease. The blue marks aligned into a vertical row beneath the final mark. Almost concealed by the Society photograph, Walter had drawn the outline of a small bell. Inside it was a single letter, H. Helen Crane. Walter's final message did not point only toward Arthur Bell. It connected his own daughter to the article he intended to publish. The evening paper had preserved the truth after its reader was silenced. But it had not yet told us whether Helen was another victim of Walter's confession, or the person who made certain he never delivered it. Chapter 9. The folded evidence Inspector Thomas Reed gathered the household at Harrison House on the 2nd evening after Walter Crane's murder. Helen Crane occupied the sofa, with Martin standing behind her. Edith Ward sat beside Ruth Hale. Samuel North had been brought from police custody and placed near the fireplace under the eye of an officer. Arthur Bell arrived last, carrying his document case and wearing the expression of a man summoned to correct the errors of lesser minds. I took a chair near the door. Wolfe remained at home. He had said the final performance required another setting, but he had allowed Reed to begin the overture. On the table lay Walter's evening newspaper, the hidden strip from his unpublished article, the old 4th edition of the Harrison Evening Record, and photographs of the chair marks. Reed remained standing. Walter Crane was killed because he intended to expose a betrayal that began 22 years ago, he said. Andrew Bell altered the ownership records for the Eastern Warehouse land. James Hale discovered the fraud. Peter Ward witnessed James's statement, and Walter prepared a 4th newspaper edition reporting it. Ruth's hands tightened in her lap. Andrew Bell stopped that edition. Reed continued. Walter helped him. James disappeared, and Peter Ward was confined under a false name at Ashbrook House. Samuel North accepted money for his silence, though he later returned it. Walter kept the last surviving copy of the suppressed newspaper and fragments of the original company ledger. Arthur Bell crossed one leg over the other. "This history is unpleasant," he said, "but it does not identify Walter's murderer." Helen Crane and Martin sat near the bookshelves. Edith Ward and her father occupied the yellow chairs. Peter Ward looked frail, but his eyes were clearer than they had been at Ashbrook House. Ruth Hale sat beside him. Samuel North had been released from custody but remained charged with concealing evidence. Inspector Reed stood near my desk. Arthur Bell entered between 2 officers and was placed in the red leather chair. Fritz brought Wolfe beer, then departed with the dignity of a man unwilling to let homicide interfere with an orderly household. Wolfe looked around the room. "Mr. Bell murdered Walter Crane," he began. "Inspector Reed has established his movements, his motive, and his physical connection to the room. The newspaper bears the mark of his metal thumb guard, graphite oil from his document case, and wax used upon his private files. The study floor preserved the impression of his seal beneath the displaced chair." Bell's mouth tightened. "Circumstantial scraps." "Certainly. Circumstances are what men live among. When properly assembled, they are more reliable than declarations." Wolfe poured beer and watched the foam settle. "You entered Harrison House behind Mr. North, through the basement door. While Walter Crane was absent at the old press building, you waited in his study and searched the evening paper. Miss Ward had already folded it crosswise, while attempting to decode its marks. You assumed her folds formed part of Walter's message and repeated them." Bell said nothing. When Walter returned, Wolfe continued, "You demanded the Hale-Faywood statement and the proof of the article he planned to publish the following morning. You remained with him for more than an hour. At 8:40, the argument was heard by a neighbor. Walter refused to surrender all his evidence. You struck him with the printing awl near the curtain recess." "I did not." "You then placed his body in the chair, turned it toward the window, deliberately stopped the desk clock at 7:10, and arranged the folded paper beside him. You wished the police to believe he had been killed while watching the basement signal. That false scene moved the apparent time of death to 7:10, when you expected Miss Ward's actions to attract suspicion." Edith faced Bell. "You used me from the beginning. You had already searched the paper." Bell replied. "You could have killed him, but she could not have made the later fold," Wolfe said. "Miss Ward is left-handed and wore gloves. The deep crease surrounding the ledger fragment was pressed by a guarded right thumb. Yours." Wolfe shifted his attention to the others. "Mr. Bell's purpose was larger than protecting his name. 22 years ago, his father altered the ownership records for the Eastern Warehouse land. James Hale caught him removing the company ledger. Peter Ward witnessed Mr. Hale's statement, and Walter prepared a 4th edition of his newspaper, exposing the fraud." Ruth looked toward Peter. "James followed your truck." Peter nodded slowly. "He said the ledger had to reach the police." "Andrew Bell blocked the truck near the river," Wolfe said. "Peter Ward was struck and suffered the injuries that destroyed much of his memory. Walter arrived and helped Andrew Bell conceal him at Ashbrook House under a false name." Helen's voice was low. "My father knew Peter was alive for all those years." "Yes," and said nothing. "Yes." She lowered her eyes. "Walter's silence made him an accomplice to cruelty," Wolfe said. "His late decision to confess may be called remorse, fear, or a desire to control the final account. Whatever its source, he intended to restore the names of Peter Ward and James Hale." Ruth looked at Wolfe. "But where is James?" Wolfe turned to me. "Archie." Its blue marks had led us to the 4th edition, Peter Ward, Ashbrook House, and Walter's unpublished article. The final mark was the outline of a bell containing the letter H. Mr. Goodwin initially supposed the H referred to Helen Crane, Wolfe said. That was understandable and wrong. Walter did not use names when a direct accusation might be discovered. He used pictures and placement. The H was not beside the bell. It was inside it. "Hale inside bell," Reed said. "Precisely." Bell moved in the red chair. Wolfe saw it. "Your father concealed James Hale somewhere within property owned by the Bell family." Walter's redevelopment article supplied the location. One figure was marked twice, Warehouse Building H, formerly the Bell Metal Works. Reed had obtained a search order that morning. Behind a false wall in the old furnace room, police found human remains, a rusted watch bearing James Hale's initials, and the missing company ledger sealed inside a metal cash box. Ruth closed her eyes. Edith took her hand. Wolfe waited before continuing. "The ledger proves that Andrew Bell transferred the Eastern Warehouse lots to a holding company he controlled. Walter Crane signed the altered agreement in exchange for a share." James Hale interrupted them before the original record could be destroyed. "Who killed James?" Ruth asked. "Andrew Bell struck him with an iron bar. Walter did not deliver the blow, but he helped conceal the body and later declared Mr. Hale responsible for the fire." Samuel North stared at the carpet. "I should have spoken." "Yes," Wolfe said. "You should have." North accepted it without protest. Peter Ward leaned forward. Walter knew where James was. "Not at first. Andrew Bell kept that fact from him. Walter learned it only 3 weeks ago, when Mr. Ward began recovering fragments of memory and spoke of the furnace room. Walter then reopened his investigation." Reed placed a copy of Arthur Bell's trust records on Wolfe's desk. They showed that Arthur had known the location for 12 years. Andrew Bell left a private memorandum describing the concealment and ordering his son to prevent excavation near Building H. The proposed sale of the warehouse property would have brought demolition crews to the site within days. "That was why Walter had to die immediately," Reed said. "His article would expose Peter, the altered deeds, and the location of James's body." Wolfe nodded. Arthur Bell had preserved his father's crime by continuing the payments to Ashbrook House and controlling the warehouse land. Walter's confession threatened both the Bell name and Mr. Bell's liberty as an active conspirator. Bell looked at Peter Ward. "My father created this. I inherited it." "You inherited knowledge," Wolfe said. "You chose concealment. Then you chose murder." Bell's composure finally broke. He said Walter had summoned him to Harrison House and demanded that he surrender Andrew Bell's memorandum. Walter planned to print everything, including Arthur's visits to Ashbrook House and his efforts to prevent the sale inspection. "I tried to reason with him," Bell said. "He had kept silent for 22 years. He had profited as much as my father. And when he claimed the privilege of repentance," Wolfe said, "you resented it. He called my father a thief and a killer." Both statements were accurate. Bell's hands gripped the arms of the chair. "He said the paper would ruin me by morning." He laughed. "I reached for the proof, and he struck me. The awl was on the desk. I did not plan. Fui, you entered secretly, waited in darkness, and searched his papers. Whether you planned the exact movement of your hand is immaterial. You prepared for violence and used it when deceit failed." Bell lowered his head. His confession supplied the remaining details. He had removed most of Walter's article proof, planted the awl in the parlor, stopped the clock, and turned the chair toward the window. He returned later through the basement passage to steal the printing plate. While hiding it, he left the correctly folded newspaper in the cabinet with the taunting note. He believed the missing plate and article would bury the old crime again. He had not realized that a strip of proof remained between the pages, or that his seal had marked the fresh floor wax. Reed took him away. The gathering ended slowly. Peter Ward left with Edith. Ruth asked to accompany them. She had lost her husband but recovered his name, and for the moment that was all justice could give her. Helen surrendered Walter's profits from the warehouse trust to a fund for the Ward and Hale families. Martin agreed after Reed explained that the original ledger would make disagreement expensive. Samuel North gave a full sworn statement and accepted the charges resulting from his theft of the 4th edition. When they were gone, Reed remained by Wolfe's desk. "You knew the ledger was in Building H before we searched it." "I inferred it from one letter inside a drawing of a bell. From that, the marked redevelopment article, Mr. Ward's recovered memory, and Arthur Bell's opposition to excavation, one clue may suggest. Several agreeing clues establish," I said. "And the wrong fold. That exposed the killer's presence and ignorance. Mr. Bell knew Walter's crimes, finances, and hidden documents, but he did not know the simplest detail of Walter's evenings. He folded the paper according to his own habit." Wolfe lifted his beer. "A murderer may invent a false hour, move a body, and arrange a room. He cannot conveniently discard every unconscious act accumulated through a lifetime." A week later, Thomas Reed placed Walter's evening newspaper in the Riddle Street archive. It was displayed beside the recovered 4th edition under glass. The card beneath it did not mention Wolfe, which Wolfe considered proper, or me, which I considered an oversight. It read, "The Crane newspaper, its altered fold, revealed the murder and restored the names of James Hale and Peter Ward." Harrison House was eventually sold. Building H was demolished only after James Hale received a public burial. The ownership fraud was corrected. The Bell Trust was dissolved, and Ashbrook House amended Peter Ward's records to restore his true name. Riddle Street returned to its ordinary evenings. Lamps appeared behind curtains, chairs faced familiar fireplaces, and newspapers arrived upon front steps. But people handled them differently after Walter Crane's case. They had learned that routine was a silent witness. A chair moved a few feet, a page turned by the wrong hand, or a fold pressed in the wrong direction could speak when the dead could not. Every evening the papers were opened and folded again, and on Riddle Street, no one forgot the one that had been folded wrong. Beneath the 4 lines was another impression, too faint to read. Grant used side lighting and photographed it from several angles. Slowly the words appeared. "The reader will ask for the Hale statement. The killer will ask for the ledger." Ruth gripped the edge of the desk. "What does that mean?" Helen asked. I said, "Walter expected more than one person. Someone interested in justice would want James Hale's statement. Someone protecting the old fraud would want the company ledger." Reed turned to each of them. "What did Walter tell you he had found?" Martin said. "The original warehouse records." Edith said. "A memorandum from Samuel North." North said, "The surviving newspaper." Helen admitted. Walter had mentioned a signed statement. Arthur Bell answered last. "He told me nothing." Reed opened Bell's document case. Inside was a letter written by Walter 3 days earlier. "Arthur, we now possess the ledger your father removed from the warehouse. Come at 9 on Thursday if you wish to discuss what follows." Walter Bell read the letter without touching it. "You told me Walter asked you to bring trust documents," Reed said. "That was another lie. It was a private legal matter. It became a murder inquiry." Bell's composure cracked, but only for an instant. "The letter proves I was expected at 9. It does not prove I arrived earlier." "No," Reed agreed. "The newspaper may do that." Grant had found a small brown smear inside the marked rectangle. It was not blood or ordinary dirt. Under magnification, it contained fine fibers and a trace of green wax. The same green wax used to seal files in Arthur Bell's office. Edith had also worked there, and the old account packet had been tied with cord bearing a green flake. Once again, the evidence placed Bell and Edith within the same circle. Wolfe, still listening by telephone, asked a question. "Mr. Reed, which hand did Mr. Bell use to fold the sample paper?" "His right." "And the murderer's fold?" Grant examined the creases. The pressure was heavier on the left edge, and a thumb impression, too blurred for identification, lay near the lower corner. "Made by a left-handed person," he said. Bell was right. Handed Edith Ward was left. Handed Arthur Bell allowed himself a thin smile. "Inspector, It seems your newspaper has chosen another reader. Edith stared at the creases. I carried the paper into the study, but I did not fold it that way. Did you search it? Reed asked. Numbered. Did you know Walter kept messages between the pages? I knew he marked stories. I did not know the marks formed instructions. That was possible. It was also exactly what the murderer would say. I gave Wolfe the new facts after Reed ended the call. Wolfe listened, then asked me whether Edith wore gloves on the night of the murder. A green pair, I said. She removed them in the hall, where they searched. Yes, nothing found. Then find out whether the left glove has been cleaned. Reed sent Grant to examine it. The glove was recovered from Edith's room. Its right palm carried ordinary dust. Its left palm had recently been treated with cleaning fluid, and one seam contained a speck of grey paper fibre. Edith did not protest when Reed showed it to her. I cleaned the glove because I spilled ink on it. Her answer had come too quickly. She knew the colour of the mark Reed meant, though he had not identified it. Reed noticed. So did I. Edith closed her eyes for a second. You saw the hidden mark, Reed said. Yes. When? Before I carried the paper to Walter. Did you understand it? Number, I tried to. With the cross. Fold. She looked toward the doorway. Not in the study. Where? That could explain the left-handed folds, but not the ledger fragment later wrapped inside them, unless the paper had been folded again along the same creases after Walter died. Reed leaned toward her. Who told you the paper contained a message? Edith opened her eyes. Arthur Bell. Bell's smile vanished. He telephoned me that afternoon, she continued. He said Walter was hiding proof in the evening paper. He ordered me to find the marked section and tell him what it said. You worked for Walter, Helen said. Why obey Bell? Edith looked at Arthur, because he knew what happened to my father. The room became silent again. Until that moment, no one had mentioned Edith's father. Wolfe's voice came sharply through the telephone. Archie, ask Miss Ward his name. I did. Peter Ward, Edith said. He drove the Harrison delivery truck on the night of the fire. He disappeared the same night James Hale did. The wrong fold had exposed more than the person who searched Walter's newspaper. It had connected two vanished men, the suppressed 4th edition, and Arthur Bell's office, to a secret older than Walter's murder. Chapter 7. The person who waited in the dark Edith Ward had admitted making the first cross, fold in Walter Crane's evening newspaper, that solved one small problem and created 3 larger ones. She claimed Arthur Bell telephoned her that afternoon and ordered her to search the paper for a hidden message. Bell denied it. The telephone exchange recorded a call from his office to Harrison House at 4:12, but it could not identify the speaker. Bell employed 2 clerks, either of whom might have placed it. Inspector Thomas Reed kept Edith and Bell in separate rooms overnight. By morning, neither had altered a word. I reported the deadlock to Wolfe at breakfast. He was consuming eggs, fried corn cakes, and enough smoked ham to support a small farm. Miss Ward folded the newspaper before the murder, I said. Later the killer folded it along the same creases around the ledger fragment. That made the pressure appear left-handed. Wolfe lowered his fork. You are assuming the second person saw and reused her folds. It beats assuming the paper folded itself. Barely. The first folds were Edith's. The second search happened in the study. Arthur Bell naturally folds a paper crosswise. He also knew about the ledger. Mr. Bell is an inviting candidate. You make that sound like a defect. An inviting candidate is often one whom the murderer has invited. After breakfast, I returned to Harrison House. Reed had arranged the known movements on a large sheet pinned to the study wall. At 6, the newspaper arrived. At 6:25, Martin handled it in the hall and left the shallow crease made by his signet ring. At 6:40, Samuel North claimed he met Walter in the study. At 6:45, Edith carried the paper upstairs after attempting to decode it. At 6:50, North left through the basement entrance with the surviving 4th edition hidden beneath his coat. At 7:10, Edith flashed the green pressroom lamp and started the machinery for several seconds. At 8:40, a neighbor heard Walter arguing with someone. At 9, Arthur Bell claimed he reached the front door and found the study locked. The body was discovered at 9:20. Reed tapped the first 2 hours. Something is wrong here. With the people or the times? Both. He had checked Walter's movements on the day of his death. Walter had attended a bank meeting at 5. His driver dropped him at Harrison House at 5:40. At 6:30 he crossed the rear courtyard to the old press office, a separate brick building beyond the garden wall. What for? I asked. According to North, to retrieve the preserved 4th edition. That meant North's story could still be true. Walter met him in the study at 6:40, showed him the newspaper packet, and quarreled with him. North stole the packet and left at 6:50, but the caretaker of the old press office had seen Walter return at 6:55. He came back to the press building. I asked. Reed nodded. The caretaker says Walter was searching for a metal dispatch box. He stayed until 7:15. Then Walter was away from the house when Edith flashed the lamp, and someone was already inside waiting for him. The chair now mattered in a new way. Walter had left it facing the doorway after meeting North. During Walter's absence, the hidden visitor entered through the side basement door, climbed the service stairs, and sat in the chair. From there, the visitor could watch the doorway without being seen from the hall. The newspaper lay on the desk nearby. Edith had already made the cross fold while searching it. The visitor opened it, followed the blue marks, and looked for the evidence Walter had hidden. At 7:10, the green lamp flashed in the basement window. The visitor could see its reflection in the glass of the picture opposite the study door. The signal announced that Walter's trap had begun. Walter returned to the house shortly after 7:15. Reed called Ruth Hale into the study. You said you heard the side door at 6:30. Yes. Was it one sound or two? She considered. The outer door closed first, then the inner basement door. How much time between them? Perhaps half a minute. Long enough for 2 people? Yes. North had entered through the outer door. Someone else could have followed before it closed, remained in the dark basement passage, and waited for North to leave. Did you hear anyone come upstairs? Reed asked. The press machinery started at 7:10. It would have covered footsteps. That had been the purpose of the signal. Walter thought it would tell him when his expected visitor arrived. Instead, it allowed the hidden intruder to climb the stairs unheard. The killer had entered Harrison House before Walter returned from the old press office. I telephoned Wolfe. Then the visitor's purpose was not solely homicide, Wolfe said. Had he intended merely to kill Mr. Crane? He could have waited near the garden path. He chose the study because the study contained something he wanted. The ledger? Everyone has assumed the ledger was one object. It may have been several. The old company ledger had supposedly proved that Andrew Bell altered ownership records after the warehouse fire. A fragment was found in the handle of the planted printing owls. Another fragment had been folded inside the newspaper after Walter's death. The complete volume had never appeared. Wolfe continued. What did Mr. Crane seek in the old press office? A metal dispatch box. Find it. The press building stood behind Harrison House, separated from it by a neglected courtyard. Its windows were filmed with soot, and the room still held dead machinery under canvas covers. The caretaker led Reed and me to the basement record room. Walter had opened 3 cabinets before his death. The 4th remained locked. Reed obtained the key from Ruth. Inside the cabinet was an empty space, shaped like a narrow metal box. Dust covered the shelf except for 2 fresh finger marks, and a streak where the box had been pulled forward. It was here that evening, the caretaker said. I saw Mr. Crane carrying it upstairs. But he returned to Harrison House without it, Reed said. We searched the building behind an old paper cutting machine. I noticed a scrape in the dust. Reed and I shifted the machine far enough to expose a loose floorboard. The dispatch box was beneath it. Its lock had been forced. Inside were cancelled, checks, company letters, and a thin folder labeled Hale Feeward. The folder was empty, but the pressure of papers stored inside had left impressions on its cardboard cover. Grant used side lighting. 3 lines became visible. Statement of James Hale witnessed by Peter Ward, deliver only if Walter refuses Edith's father, had not merely driven the newspaper truck on the night of the fire. He had witnessed James Hale's signed statement. Reed brought Edith to the press office. She stared at the empty folder. My father told my mother he had seen something that would destroy two powerful men. The next morning, he vanished. We were told he stole money from the press and fled. Who told you? Reed asked. Andrew Bell. Did Walter ever speak to you about it? Not until last month. He said my father had not stolen anything. He said Peter helped James prepare a statement accusing Andrew Bell of altering the land records. And Walter? Edith looked at the floor. The statement accused Walter too. That was the old betrayal. James Hale had trusted Walter Crane to publish the truth. Peter Ward had trusted Walter to protect the signed statement. Instead, Walter stopped the fourth edition, concealed the document, and allowed both men to disappear beneath accusations of theft and arson. Why reopen it after 22 years? Reed asked. Because the Eastern warehouse property was about to be sold. Walter would receive millions from land he knew had been stolen. He said he could not accept the money without clearing James and Peter. Did you believe his conscience suddenly troubled him? Walter's conscience only spoke when it expected an audience. She admitted she had helped him arrange the classified advertisement and the green signal. Walter hoped whoever had been searching his study would reveal himself by trying to decode the newspaper. Who knew about the dispatch box? Reed asked. Walter, Samuel North, and Arthur Bell. Mr. Bell's firm prepared the old press inventory. Reed examined the broken lock. A narrow steel instrument had been inserted and twisted. The marks matched the blade of a legal document opener, the kind Arthur Bell carried in his case. That was persuasive but not conclusive. Bell's office had supplied such openers to every employee, including Edith. We returned to the study and reconstructed the hidden visitor's movements. The intruder followed North through the basement entrance and waited in darkness. After North left with the fourth edition, Edith activated the press machinery. The intruder climbed the service stairs, entered the study, and sat in Walter's chair. While waiting, the visitor searched the newspaper. He saw Edith's unnatural cross, fold, and assumed it was part of Walter's code. He opened and refolded the pages looking for the message. When Walter returned at 7:15, he found the visitor waiting yet. The fatal argument was not heard until 8:40. For more than an hour, Reed said, Walter and the visitor remained together. That was no sudden attack, I said. It was a negotiation. The visitor wanted the Hale-Faywood statement. Walter wanted the missing company ledger. Each apparently believed the other possessed what he needed. Reed questioned Arthur Bell again. Bell admitted knowing that Peter Ward witnessed James's statement, but he denied entering Harrison House before 9. My father told me the statement had been destroyed, he said. When? Reed asked. Shortly before his death. That was 12 years ago. Yes, and for 12 years you believed Walter might possess proof that your father stole the warehouse land. Bell's expression tightened. I believed Walter possessed many papers. That is the business of a publisher. You had 12 years to silence him. If I wanted Walter dead, why wait? Wolfe answered that when Reed called him. Because Walter remained silent, Wolfe said. There was no need to kill him while he protected the same secret. His decision to expose the betrayal transformed an old accomplice into a present danger. Bell says he arrived at 9, then established where he was at 7. Bell's driver claimed he dropped him at his office at 6:15. Bell's secretary left at 6:30. From then until 8:50, when Bell called for a cab, no one could place him anywhere. His office stood 12 minutes from Riddle Street on foot. Reed searched Bell's brown overcoat again. The fabric did not match the thread caught on Walter's chair, but inside the right pocket Grant found a grain of black metal and a sliver of red sealing wax. The metal matched the corroded surface of the dispatch box. The red wax matched the seal Walter used on private statements. Bell looked at the particles in Grant's dish. They were planted. By whom? Reed asked. Edith Ward. She worked in my office, knew my habits, and hated my father. Edith faced him. I hated Walter too. That did not make me protect your family. James, Hale, Peter Ward, Ruth and Edith belonged to the betrayed. Andrew Bell, Walter, and perhaps Arthur belonged to those who had profited from silence. Samuel North stood between them, guilty of cowardice and theft, but perhaps not murder. Reed looked again at the timeline. The killer had not hurried into Walter's study, struck and escaped. He had entered early, sat in the victim's chair, searched the newspaper, and waited in darkness. He had waited through Edith's signal, Walter's return, and more than an hour of argument. That was not the patience of a frightened intruder. It was the patience of someone who had guarded the same secret for years and believed one final act would bury it forever. But Walter had prepared for that act. He had hidden one last message in the paper. Near the edge of the marked section, beneath the classified advertisement, Grant found 6 tiny punctures. When the newspaper was held against the window, the holes formed 2 letters, P.W. Peter Ward beneath them. Nearly invisible, Walter had written a single word in blue pencil. Allie Vedith saw it and stopped breathing. Her father had vanished 22 years earlier. According to Walter Crane's last hidden message, he had not died that night. Chapter 8. The last article in the paper, the word alive, beneath Peter Ward's initials, changed the atmosphere in Walter Crane's study. Until then, Edith Ward had behaved like a woman determined to control every breath. Now she gripped the desk with both hands and stared at the newspaper as though her father might rise from between its pages. Inspector Thomas Reed gave her a chair. "When did you last see Peter?" he asked. "The morning of the warehouse fire. I was 9 years old." "Did he have any identifying marks?" "A burn across his right wrist. He lost the end of his smallest finger in a printing press." Reed wrote it down. "Did Walter tell you Peter was alive?" "Number," he only said. "My father had not stolen the delivery money." He promised to explain everything after the person searching his study had been identified. Walter had planned explanations for the following morning. His murderer had planned a shorter schedule. We carried the evening newspaper to Wolfe's office. He sat behind his desk with his eyes closed, while Reed described the 6 punctures forming PW and the blue word beneath them. When Reed finished, Wolfe opened his eyes. "The marks were made before Mr. Crane died. The ink had dried before the later cross-fold," Grant said. "And the punctures pass through how many pages? 6. Then examine every place they touch. Mr. Crane did not pierce 6 pages merely to write 2 letters upon one." Grant spread the newspaper on Wolfe's desk. The first 2 punctures touched the classified advertisement Walter had used as bait. The next 2 passed through the warehouse redevelopment story. The last pair pierced a small article on the society page. The headline read, "Bell Charity to open new reading room." It concerned Ashbrook House, a private care home supported by a foundation chaired by Arthur Bell. The article included a photograph of Bell standing among residents during a recent visit. Wolfe held out his hand for the magnifying glass. "Number his daily habits do." Reed unfolded the evening paper. Walter always folded his newspaper lengthwise twice. Ruth Hale saw him do it every evening. Edith Ward carried the paper to him. Samuel North worked beside him for years and used the same printer's fold. "Martin and Helen knew the habit," Helen said. "Then none of us would have folded it incorrectly." "Exactly." Reed folded the paper across the middle, reproducing the thick square found beside Walter's body. The person who searched this newspaper did not understand Walter's routine. Edith made the first shallow cross, fold in the hall after Arthur Bell ordered her to look for a hidden message. Later, the killer searched the paper again and followed Edith's creases, believing they formed part of Walter's code. "You have no proof that I made that call." "The call came from your office. 2 clerks were present. One left before 4, the other has testified that you sent him to the courthouse at 3:30. For the first time, Bell's precise expression showed strain. Reed continued. "The killer found a fragment of the company ledger and folded the newspaper around it. He then placed Walter's body in the chair and left the paper beside him. He believed the room showed an old man murdered while reading." Martin frowned. But Uncle Walter wasn't reading. The chair proved that. Reed displayed the first photograph. 4 shallow depressions showed where the chair normally stood, facing the fireplace. A second set of marks placed it toward the doorway. A third showed it turned toward the window when Walter's body was found. Walter faced the doorway while he spoke to his visitor, Reed said. After killing him near the curtain recess, the murderer returned the body to the chair and rotated it toward the window. Why? Helen asked. To make us believe Walter had been watching the basement entrance and was attacked during Edith's signal at 7:10. That false time protected someone who claimed not to arrive until 9. Everyone looked at Arthur Bell. He smiled, but it required effort. A chair is not a clock. No, Reed agreed. But moving it left a clock. That was new to most of the room. Reed lifted a photograph of the chair's rear leg. A dark crescent marked the wooden floor where the leg had been dragged. The study floor was waxed at 6:30 that evening. Ruth finished near the fireplace, but did not wax the strip beside the window until after Walter left for the old press building. She was interrupted and left the final section untouched. Ruth nodded. I returned to it the following morning, but the police had sealed the room. The chair crossed the freshly waxed section when the murderer turned it toward the window. The wax hardened around a small impression beneath the rear leg. Grant placed a transparent enlargement on the table. The impression consisted of 3 curved lines surrounding the letters. Ab Arthur Bell did not move. Reed opened Bell's document case and removed a green wax seal mounted on a brass handle. The face of the seal bore the same design. 3 curved lines and the initials. Ab, the seal fell from your case while you searched Walter's newspaper, Reed said. You stepped on it, pressed it into the soft floor wax, and recovered it. Later, when you moved the chair, its leg crossed the impression and preserved half of it beneath the wood. You could pick up the seal, but you could not remove the mark without moving the body again. Bell inspected the photograph. My seal was in this house. Often Walter's trust documents required it. Not this seal. Your father's seal had the initials AB2, but its border was square. You replaced it 12 years ago with this round design. Ruth last waxed the study floor 3 months ago. The mark was made on the murder night. Bell's hand moved toward his document case and stopped. Reed lifted the newspaper. When I asked everyone to demonstrate how they handled a newspaper, you made the same unequal cross, fold found beside Walter's body. Your lower corner extended beyond the upper edge by 5/8 of an inch. That is not unique. The reason for it is. Grant displayed another enlargement. On the right edge of the murder paper was a narrow polished line. It had been pressed by something smooth while the fold was made. Reed pointed to Bell's right hand. You wear a metal guard on your thumb because of an old joint injury. It produces that polished line whenever you press a crease. Bell curled his thumb into his palm. The newspaper from Walter's study carries the same width and angle as your thumb guard, Reed said. It also carries graphite oil from your document case and green wax from your private files. Edith worked in my office. She had access to all of those things. She made the first fold while wearing gloves. Her fold was shallow and left-handed. The later fold around the ledger was pressed by a guarded right thumb. Edith looked from the newspaper to Bell. You used the creases I made. Bell's voice hardened. You searched Walter's study. You knew about the article. Your father had been hidden for 22 years. You had a better reason than anyone to kill him. No, Ruth said. She had a reason to keep him alive until he published the truth. That landed harder than Edith's denial would have. Reed placed the hidden strip of Walter's final article beside the newspaper. It showed that Arthur had paid Ashbrook House to keep Peter Ward under a false name and had instructed the home to deny inquiries. The full article would have exposed you the next morning, Reed said. Not only your father's fraud, but your own part in continuing it. Walter invited you to discuss the company ledger. You arrived before Walter returned from the old press building, entering behind Samuel North through the basement door. North looked up. I heard someone behind me. I thought it was Ruth. You waited in the dark, Reed told Bell. When Edith started the press machinery, you climbed the service stairs. You sat in Walter's chair and searched the newspaper. Walter returned at 7:15 and found you waiting. Bell's eyes moved toward the doorway, following the line the chair had faced. You argued for more than an hour, Reed continued. You demanded the Hale Faywood statement and the draft of Walter's article. Walter demanded the company ledger your father stole. When he refused to surrender his evidence, you killed him near the curtain recess. With what? Bell asked. Your men found no weapon belonging to me. You used Walter's printing awl. Then you hid fragments of the ledger inside its hollow handle and planted it under the parlor sofa, hoping the evidence would implicate someone in the household. Why would I put evidence inside the weapon? You did not know it was evidence. The paper fragment was already concealed in the handle. Walter had prepared another hiding place. Reed's final document was Arthur's letter from Walter. He now possessed the ledger your father removed from the warehouse. Come at 9 on Thursday if you wish to discuss what follows. You thought the original ledger was hidden in the newspaper, Reed said. That was why you searched it before and after the murder. You found only a fragment and the proof of Walter's article. You have built a fantasy from folds, wax, and old accusations. You cannot prove I was here before 9. I can, a voice said from the doorway. Peter Ward entered with Edith supporting his arm. Bell's face changed. Peter stared at him. You came to Ashbrook yesterday afternoon. You said Walter had found the statement. You asked where he kept his newspaper files. Bell recovered quickly. The man has suffered memory loss for 22 years. Yes, Reed said. But Ashbrook records every visit. You signed in at 4:10 and left at 5:30. You went directly to your office, telephoned Edith, and then came to Harrison House. Bell reached for his document case. The officer behind him caught his wrist. Reed took the case and opened it. Beneath the legal papers was a false bottom. Inside lay several burned fragments of Walter's unpublished article. One fragment contained the closing line, "If I am prevented from publishing this account, the evidence has been entrusted to Nero Wolfe." Bell stared at it. That sentence was false. Walter had entrusted nothing to Wolfe except his suspicion. It had been bait, and Bell had carried it away after the murder, without realizing what it would reveal. Reed placed him under arrest. As the officer led Bell toward the door, he stopped beside Walter's chair. All this because of a newspaper. No, I said, because you folded it as yourself instead of as Walter. The chair had moved only a few feet. The newspaper had changed shape by only a few inches. Yet those small alterations had separated the dead man's habits from the murderer's performance. Walter Crane had arranged his life according to routines. Arthur Bell had tried to use those routines to disguise a killing. He failed because he understood Walter's secrets better than he understood the way Walter read the evening news. Chapter 10. The last evening paper. Arthur Bell spent his first night in custody, denying everything. By morning he had reduced his position to denying only the murder, which Inspector Thomas Reed regarded as progress. The final gathering took place that afternoon in Wolfe's office on West 35th Street. Wolfe had agreed to it because the chairs were built to support him, the beer was available at the proper temperature, and nobody could ask him to travel.